Hello everyone. Today's video 17, has been entitled How to Do Research in EFL Teaching and Learning. So today we'll be exploring different ways to do research, how to improve our practices, how to inform our practice, how to collect evidence, and how to improve learning in the end. So we'll be talking about inquiring, investigating, and how to impact learning in the end. So many teachers believe and say, I would like to do research, but I don't know where to start. Others think research is something only professors, doctors, students, or academics do. But here's the reality. If you have a classroom, if you have students, if you have questions, then you already have the main ingredients for research. Today's video will show you how to transform everyday teaching problems into meaningful EFL research projects. So today's competencies are, by the end of this video, you will be able to identify researchable problems in EFL contexts, formulate research questions, select an appropriate research design, collect classroom data, avoid common mistakes made by novice researchers, and then also hopefully you will be able to understand how small-scale classroom research can improve teaching practice. So the biggest idea, okay, the biggest myth or assumption behind research is the fact that many teachers believe research begins with statistics. Wrong. Research begins with curiosity. So that's a key aspect. Good researchers constantly ask questions such as, why are my students struggling with speaking, for example? Why do they avoid using English? Why does one activity, for example, work and another fail? Why do some projects work and some others fail? Why do some students improve faster than others? So teachers are constantly examining their practices. Research starts with a problem, not with a methodology, not with SPSS, and not with statistics. So it begins with curiosity and your ability to articulate a logical research idea. So now we'll be exploring the different steps to come up with a good research project. Step number one, find a problem. Every research project begins with a puzzle. Examples, speaking. You need to focus on one key aspect. You cannot cover all dimensions behind language learning or teaching. That in the future may become your research line. So you need to focus on one key aspect that you want to explore, that calls your attention and that fosters curiosity on your behalf. So for example, speaking. Students know grammar but don't speak. Vocabulary. Students forget words quickly. Motivation. Students seem disengaged. Technology. All tools are being used, but are they actually helping? Assessment. Students perform well in tests, but poorly in communication. So everything we know about second language learning and teaching, everything we know comes from researchers, educators, EFL teachers who had these ideas, who are curious about the process, and they wanted to find out and find answers to those questions for the sake, of course, for the students' sake in the end. So our research tip here is the best research problems usually come from your own classroom, not from Google, not from trends, not from social media, not from your colleagues, not from your students, but they come directly from what is going on in your classroom settings. Step number two, turn the problem into a question. This question, um, well, this is an example of a bad question. How can I improve English teaching? Too broad. This question shouldn't be that broad. You should narrow questions down. So a better way to formulate this question would be, how does role play affect speaking confidence among A2 EFL learners? Or even better, how do Chilean A2 EFL learners perceive the use of role play activities for developing speaking confidence? Notice how the question becomes specific, focused, and manageable. Okay, so you can do some research based on those questions. So the more limited your question is, the better for you. So read the literature. This is step number three. This is where many teachers become overwhelmed. You don't need to read, and this is very important, 200 articles. Start with 5 key studies, recent publications, systematic reviews, and ask, what has already been discovered? What remains unclear? Where was the study, for example, carried out, the context, and where is the gap? Now, I want to share with you the difference between seminal work versus state-of-the-art studies. Seminal work refers to foundational or pioneering research studies, okay? The purpose introduces a new theory, method, or concept, okay? Time, often older and highly cited by many researchers. Answers, where did this idea comes from? So if you are dealing, for example, with the affective filter, a must in your study is Krashen's ideas, right? So Stephen Krashen's views on the affective filter. It must be there because it's part of the seminal work. Unlike the state-of-the-art studies, definition, the most recent and advanced research available. If you have a look at articles that have been recently published, they must be quoting or using seminal work to back their studies up. Purpose extends, redefines, and then, of course, specifies and applies existing knowledge. Time is usually recent, last 3-10 years, depending on the field. So let's have a look at the contrast. So answers from seminal work, where did this idea come from? Answers, where is the current status of knowledge? Okay, the role of the field as part of the seminal work is to establish the field. The role of state-of-the-art studies is to represent the cutting edge of the field. Examples in EFL research, well, suppose you are studying the communicative language teaching. Seminal Work Foundation, Del Himes, and his contribution, his definition of the communicative competence or communicative competence theory. State-of-the-art studies, recent studies. Let's consider 2023, 2026, examining communicative language teaching with artificial intelligence and tools in online environments. So in a literature review, a strong literature review usually includes both seminal works and then state-of-the-art studies. To put it in a simple way, seminal work, the classic study that started the conversation, and the state-of-the-art studies, the newest studies showing where the conversation is now. Okay, so the simple rule while doing your research studies and while coming up with your literature review, never conduct a study that has already been answered 500 times unless you're examining a new context. Context matters, and this is very important. So what works in Japan may not necessarily work in Chile. So what works in universities may not work in schools, and the other way around. So step number 4, you already have your problem, you've identified a gap. Now you have a research question. Now you've checked both seminal and the state-of-the-art studies in the field. The next step is to choose a design. Research approaches in EFL context are divided in 3, right? Quantitative, well, basically in 2, and then mixed studies. So quantitative studies answer questions such as how much has one specific student improved? So examples involve test scores, questionnaires, surveys, and of course, the key summary here is you implement descriptive statistics. Qualitative studies, in contrast, answer questions such as why, what are the students' perceptions towards one specific tool or methodology. Examples involve interviews, journals, observations, and the summary, how you tabulate and analyze the data is by means of coding, selecting different codes, perceptions, views, whether students are in favor or against one specific instrument. Most of the time in our field, we favor mixed methods, answers, questions such as how much and why. So it's a combination of both, because many EFL researchers prefer this approach because language learning is a complex phenomenon that can be answered by just statistics and numbers, but you also need students' perceptions and views. The choice will depend on your research question, of course, context, ideas, goals, or objectives. Now, the next step, once you've identified the kind of research you will be implementing, then the next step is to collect data. Data can come from students by means of interviews, focus groups, questionnaires. By the data can derive from teachers, their reflections, their observations and interviews, from your own classroom performance, tests, assignments, speaking tasks, feedback, peer observations, and from documents, from data, right? From your curricula, for example, or your educational syllabus or the national syllabi, it depends. from textbooks, lesson plans, policy documents. Common mistake here, collecting too much data. Begin small, one classroom, one course, one semester, and one single problem. The next step is to analyze the data. Ask, once you have the information, it depends on the type of study, you can have a statistician analyze your data, or you can implement and use statistical software packages, or maybe qualitative packages. What patterns do I see with this data? What surprises me? What contradicts my assumptions? Good research often challenges what we thought we knew about one specific context. This is a sample study for you to remember the different stages. So students rarely speak English. This is my problem, or this is what I've identified in the classroom setting. My research question could be stated as follows. How do information gap activities influence speaking participation among A2 EFL learners? The method: pre-observation, 6-week intervention, post-observation, student interviews, and the findings. For example, students participated more when tasks had a genuine information gap. It's simple, it's practical, it's useful, and it's researchable and publishable. So remember, this is a summary of the simple steps to start carrying out and implementing your research studies. Firstly, identify the problem, formulate your question, check the literature, okay? Choose a method, collect the data, analyze, and reflect. Good research improves teaching, remember, and learning. So if you're an EFL teacher, you can start by implementing and by doing exploratory action research, which happens to be the perfect starting point. If you're a teacher, action research may be your best option. This is the cycle. You observe, for example, you observe that students struggle with English, you plan, you design an intervention, a logical intervention to help the students overcome that issue. You act, you implement, you plan an intervention, let's say for 3-4 weeks, and then you evaluate the results. Then you repeat the cycle, and research becomes part of your teaching. So you change your specific reality, and the students have a positive effect in the classroom in the short term or in the short run. EFL reflection. This is for EFL teachers watching this video. Many teachers wait until they begin a master's or doctoral degree to conduct research, but the best researchers are often teachers who remain curious. Research is not, and this is very important, research is not something separate from teaching. Research is teaching with questions. Every classroom contains problems, data, participants, opportunities. The difference is whether we systematically integrate them. Food for researchers. For those academics, professors, or colleagues who are doing research now, I encourage you to reflect on these questions. Are we researching what is important or only what is easy to measure? How many innovations in EFL are adopted before sufficient evidence exists? Should teachers consume research or produce it? Are international findings always transferable to local context? How can classroom teachers become knowledge creators rather than knowledge consumers? What important questions remain unanswered in your own classroom? If every teacher, and this is for EFL teachers, for pre-service teachers, for those who are about to graduate, for those doing their postgraduate studies, if every teacher conducting one small study per year, how much could we learn about language teaching and learning in our countries? So, to sum up, you don't need a laboratory, you don't need a PhD, you don't need advanced statistics. You need, remember, curiosity, a problem, a question, and you need evidence, because the best research often begins with teacher asking, why is this happening in my classroom? And then having the courage to find out. Thank you so much. And if you've enjoyed this video, these are the references that back this video up. And if you've liked this video, I invite you to subscribe to my channel and connect and join the upcoming live sessions in which we'll be discussing the topics from my videos. We'll have also guests, special guests, whose expertise will be valuable, and we'll share updated insights regarding the topics that that I've been sharing with you throughout the video series. So having said this, I thank you so much and see you in the next video. Bye.